Welcome to the team-initiated problem-solving video on fidelity of implementation for solutions. In this video, we will discuss what it means to implement the solution your team has created with high fidelity. Each problem the team defines through tips needs to be monitored and evaluated. In this video, we are focusing on how to assess fidelity of implementation. In other words, how will we know that we did what we said we would do? Who will check the solution was implemented? How often will they check? The plan for assessing fidelity is recorded in the Fidelity of Implementation Measure box on the Meeting Minutes Guide. What does it mean to assess fidelity? Well, it's just another way of asking, how will we know that we did what we said we would do? When have you gathered fidelity data? It may be more often than you realize. Have you ever made a checklist and crossed off items as you've completed them? Maybe later in the week you couldn't remember if you reformatted that document, and after checking your to-do list you saw that task was checked off. Another type of daily fidelity check might be a morning routine for getting ready. Maybe you take all the bottles you're going to use out of a basket. Then, after you use each one, put them back in the basket. That way, if you forgot to put your deodorant on, you can see whether or not you did or didn't by looking at the basket. A pillbox is an easy way to measure fidelity. By nighttime, you can't remember if you took your morning pills, so you check the box to make sure it's empty. And in education, keeping a home reading log is a way for parents and teachers to determine if a student read each night. Gathering fidelity data helps a team determine to what extent a plan was implemented. Let's say a school had a problem with the cafeteria being left messy every day after lunch, and the solution plan was for teachers to review procedures for cleaning up after lunch each day with their class before they go to lunch. Now, a week later, the PBIS team wants to know how it went. Did teachers review lunch procedures each day? This is where measuring fidelity and determining if the plan was implemented comes in. In order to measure fidelity, you want to use a percent, absolute value, rate, or scale, and measure fidelity monthly, bi-weekly, or weekly. Most often, when looking at school-wide solutions, if 80% of the solution is implemented, the solution is considered implemented with fidelity. If the problem is a safety issue, though, such as students are running across the parking lot when they line up outside for recess, then we would want the solution of teachers reviewing outdoor rules each day to be implemented more than 80% of the time. So strive for higher fidelity if the problem is a safety issue. You also want to make sure it is easy to gather the fidelity data. Don't create a complicated system that takes training and extra time to implement. Remember, if you start simple, you can always build from there. One of the most basic ways to collect fidelity data is to post a question with a rating scale. If you choose a 1 to 5 scale for your questions, stick to no more than 3 questions a week and post the scale with the question or questions on a poster in a faculty room or main office, or use an electronic survey or even paper and pencil. For this first survey question about the messy cafeteria problem, how many days during the week did you review with students the procedures for cleaning the cafeteria? We can see that most of the teachers rated 4 and 5 days, meaning the messy cafeteria solution was implemented with fidelity and hopefully with positive results of a cleaner cafeteria. But in the second question, addressing the solution for a different problem, we can see that most of the teachers indicated 3 or less, meaning our intervention was not implemented with fidelity. There are a variety of ways to gather fidelity data. If you feel your staff needs a more discrete way to record fidelity data, one way is to use colored poker chips in a basket. Place a yes or no question above the basket, and staff members put a blue chip in the basket if their answer is yes, and a red chip if the answer is no. You could even include white chips as a maybe or sometimes. This allows staff members to discreetly answer and promotes honest responses. If you need more than a yes or no answer, a 6-sided die provides more options for responding. The question is placed in a workroom with a few dice around, and teachers place a small mark with a marker on the side of the die that represents the rating. At the end of the day, a designated person tallies the number of marks on each number 1 through 6. 6 meaning I fully implemented the plan, 1 meaning I did not implement the plan. And finally, an emailed survey is another way to gather data. Just remember, email is not anonymous, which might result in skewed responses. One way to get around that would be through an online survey. This could be created in Google Forms or on SurveyMonkey. Answers can be anonymous, and with only one question, they take just a minute to complete. Other options would be a paper and pencil survey. This half sheet not only records whether or not the intervention was implemented, but records any modifications or barriers for implementation. One school wanted to increase teacher-student interactions and implemented an intervention where teachers were to give high fives or fist bumps to each student as they walked in their door. When it came around to the fidelity check, one teacher indicated no, she did not implement the solution as planned because it was not characteristic of her to give high fives or fist bumps. Instead, she greeted each student by name as they walked in her door. Had the school not included the no because line, they would not have had a reason for modifying the intervention to include other ways for increasing teacher-student interactions, such as greeting them by name. This fidelity check is an observation tool for a social skills curriculum. The observer marks each item that is observed, or present during the observation, and then tallies it up to see the overall score or percentage of critical items observed. This type of fidelity check usually rates the fidelity in which a teacher implements an intervention, not just if the intervention was implemented. If you plan to rate how well a teacher uses an intervention or strategy, be careful it does not come across as a gotcha to teachers. One way would be to reserve this type of fidelity measures for teachers after they receive a training on a new intervention. An attendance sheet records if students were present for interventions and also can identify if they were engaged. In this example, an asterisk indicates a student was physically present but not engaged during the lesson. We all know students like that. This fidelity sheet records the lessons taught by the teacher. This is one way to keep track of how often interventions are implemented. When analyzing student progress, one important consideration is the frequency of the intervention. If a student made little progress over a month, and upon further review of intervention frequency data, it is found that the intervention was provided only 8 days out of 20 days in the month. This might have been due to field trips or snow days, assemblies, other common school activities, and this also might mean the team should address the frequency of the intervention before considering the intervention ineffective for that student. This might sound a little obvious, but without data indicating the frequency of intervention, oftentimes this goes overlooked and the student is provided more intensive interventions or even referred for an evaluation when the original intervention was just not provided as initially planned. In the TIPS process, collecting fidelity data is a way to determine if the plan was implemented. Did we do what we said we would do? But fidelity can make teachers uncomfortable if they believe that fidelity data will be used to evaluate their teaching. If teachers feel as though measuring fidelity is being used as a gotcha, they may not accurately report fidelity, which will defeat the purpose of collecting fidelity data in the first place. Asking everyone at a staff meeting to raise their hand if they implemented the plan will most likely result in a high fidelity score, because who wants to admit they didn't implement the plan in front of everyone, especially their administrators? But in reality, the plan may not have been implemented with such high fidelity, and that would have been indicated if it had been asked anonymously. So before implementing fidelity measures, determine how your school will make measuring fidelity less intimidating and encourage honest reporting. The more accurately fidelity is reported, the more effective that data will be in determining the next steps in the TIPS process. Now take a moment to think about fidelity measures and your school. Feel free to pause the video while you contemplate which types of fidelity measures would work for your school. Do you want the information to be anonymous? Would you prefer paper, pencil, or online measures? Which formats would teachers find least intimidating? While you think through these and other factors, keep in mind to start small and do what will work for your school. In review, this video discussed how to measure whether or not a solution was implemented with fidelity within the TIPS process. As part of evaluation planning, teams monitor and evaluate the solution for each problem. We discussed how to assess fidelity of implementation and indicated teams should write their plans here on the meeting minutes guide. But when do teams actually look at the fidelity data after it is collected? At the next meeting, the team will evaluate the impact or effectiveness of the solution. This is when the team will use the fidelity data that has been collected and discuss the correlation between fidelity of implementation data and student outcome data. In other words, if the students did not make enough progress and the solution was not implemented with high fidelity, the team may decide to investigate the barriers for implementing that solution, instead of just picking out a brand new solution. Would you like other information? We have put together a variety of resources for you to access in multiple venues. If you have any questions, please email us at tips2grant@gmail.com or follow us on our website for tips updates. We also have a YouTube channel with all our tips videos. Following us on YouTube alerts you to any new videos that are posted. And finally, Tips Connect is a Google community for professionals interested in or implementing tips to post messages or hold discussions with other professionals across the country. We would love to grow our community. If you would like to join Tips Connect, all you need is a free Gmail account and you can request an invitation. Our community is private to keep spammers from posting in the community, but anyone interested in tips is welcome and encouraged to join. Our tips team thanks you for watching our video on measuring fidelity of implementation. We wish you good luck on your future tips endeavors.